right. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. So today's Friday, it's Self-Improvement Friday. And what we are doing is that we are looking back at all the meetups that we have done. Believe it or not, we have done 26 meetups and all of them are available on YouTube. John has done a fantastic job. John has been part of my meetup, the 52 Living Ideas meetup in New York for many years, I think 3 years, something like that. And the distinguishing characteristic for him as compared to everybody else who attends my meetups in person in New York is that he drives here from Hartford. Okay. So it's a 4-hour journey each way. So he would spend 8 hours coming and going to attend my meetups. Okay. So that's what these meetups meant to him. And what I did was that I decided that I would use him as a standard because he's a very hard-nosed guy. He's very particular about whether he's getting value or not. So my standard was that if I make it worthwhile for him, for John, then it's going to be fine. Then the quality is going to be great for everybody. So that's been the standard. And I'm really impressed with, when I started doing these meetups online, he was one of the people I invited to do meetups. And he has done spectacularly, way beyond what I had hoped. So it's been amazing. So now some of you are new, some of you have been here for a long time. So what we are going to do today is we are going to be talking about lessons learned. So even if you're just new, you're going to hear all the lessons, this is actually cheating. It's like you're getting the best of the best. I would recommend going back and seeing all the videos too, but you're getting kind of a very good gist of what are the range of things that we have covered. Okay. So what I'm going to do is that I will call on people, but first I want volunteers to talk about, ideas. You will get between, you can take between 3 to 4 minutes to talk about what are the most useful things you've learned from these meetups. And once everybody has spoken, I'm going to keep track of everything. We will go ahead and visit many of those ideas and talk about it in detail, after which we're going to do breakout rooms so we can talk to each other in a group of 6 or 7 people. And then we are going to come back and do our takeaways. That's our standard format. All right, folks. So who would like to go first? What have you learned from Self-Improvement Fridays? If you want to speak, just go ahead and type ! in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Right? I'll give a few seconds. Okay, so Joe, you're first. Go ahead, Joe.
I mean, there are a lot of different lessons that I've taken from this, particular meetup. But if I had one to pick out that I really liked the most, I would go back to Flowers from Algernon. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I like that one so much is because I really think it really captured the idea of what was meaningful, what to pursue is meaningful, and the idea that I'm not going to repeat the whole story, but where essentially somebody was gaining this intelligence and becoming miserable in the interim, and then they were becoming more and more intelligent. It was just the whole philosophy of, and then they were going to lose that intelligence, and he realized that intelligence didn't mean anything without love. Mm-hmm. So there's I thought was an incredible story. I think the stories with the Aesop's fables, the idea of the sins of omission and mm-hmm. sins of commission, as far as I found those to be, very interesting, that particular meetup. I also found that there's in several of them, Fahrenheit 451 or whatever, the idea of courage is a reoccurring theme, and the importance of not accepting conventional wisdom. So those are some of my initial thoughts. I'm sure as we go into a little bit more detail, we'll go. We can keep. But if I had to pick my most meaningful ones, those would be my first off the top of my head. I have a few more that he did initially with Socrates that I found to be, or the I'm sorry, it was the Inferno as well, to be very, very helpful. So the idea of inaction, I thought was a very important lesson. And when we become complacent, and what that means, and what that would look like for a life of inaction. So instead of taking up everybody's time here this evening, I'll just leave those. I mean, there's a few more I can go into later.
No, that's fine. I think this is a good number of things on the table. We'll have everybody put things on the table, and then we'll discuss all these ideas together.
Okay,
and see if there are any connections between them. Thanks, Joe. Next up is going to be Jonathan, Mark, and Deborah. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Shrikant. Hey, Joseph, I enjoyed your comments, by the way, so you could have kept talking and it would have been fine by me. So for me, there's a few. I've been on and off to meetups, but so there's a recent one where we were discussing habit, and I found the approach that John, I don't remember if it was related to a fictional text or not, but he just brought up this approach of if you're doing something and you want to see what the long range consequences of it are, try and imagine that you repeat this same thing every single day or in another moment, and you just keep reliving it. And it's a simple thing, but doing that, as I've started doing that, and I found it pretty interesting, like it does have some impact. So that's just a little thing. But then overall, I'd say throughout the meetups, I think the most significant thing for me was the approach of reading just a text, like a fiction, not just some abstract thing, reading a story about someone's life, someone's experience, and then enjoying the reading as well. But at the end, going into it and trying to extract principles for life, as if it's not a substitute for experience, but like a supplement to your own experience in life. And so I really found that approach super interesting and useful and valuable. And I've been doing that when I now read just books of my own that I'm enjoying as well. So that's probably just the overall approach that John is taking to fiction and art. That's been my takeaway.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan. Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Deborah. Folks, you can just line up to talk about what you have learned. You can keep the comments as short as you want. You can just say one idea or something like that. Let's put everything on the table and then let's discuss all of them together. Mark, go ahead.
Okay, so I thought about this. I've actually got 7 points here, but I'll be very, very brief.
Go ahead.
Some of them are like high-level concepts from across the weeks, and some are a bit more specific. But I'm just going to read off what I've written to myself. That's number 1. Be aware of how varied and different the perspectives of others can be. Self-improvement is good, but even more so is self-acceptance. Be compassionate with oneself, but also with others. So 3, don't strive for control, strive for understanding. Again, of oneself, of one's life experiences, and of others. And then I think this one definitely much more specific to following on to what Jonathan was talking about. I think a little bit. The stories we tell ourselves, as well as the stories we read, have power. And this can be for better or for worse. So we need to be aware of those stories we take in. This is my personal one. Yeah, it is very important to me that your goals are compatible with your values. I don't think you can succeed if they're not. And then a couple of like more specific ones that I remember from over the weeks. Where possible, always use data and measurements to track your progress. But remember that the direction is more important than the speed. And then last but not least, when examining and evaluating your habitual behaviors, you don't have to change them all, but if you decide you do want to change something, try and use some of the proven techniques that we were discussing in a recent meetup such as repetition, stacking, and triggers.
Wonderful. Mark, that was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Delightful.
I can put them in the chat because that was a lot, I know.
Yeah, you can put them in chat. I'm going to put everything down again for everybody. So I'll put all of it together, and we'll go through everything. But please go ahead and put it in the chat. It's good that people will start thinking about it as well. So it's going to be Deborah, Nir, and Jean. Deborah.
Okay, I saw that Shelly asked Mark a question. I don't know if he wanted to answer it out loud before I go or just type it in the chat. I don't know.
No, forget about the chat. We'll go ahead and finish the voice.
Okay.
I will go ahead and take everything in parallel. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I took some notes on this. So I wanted to talk about, I guess, two of the things that we read that kind of stuck with me. So I really liked self-reliance when we read that, and then also the machine stops. And I thought that there were key concepts, I guess, in each of them that I really liked. So I feel like the main kind of theme, at least that I took from self-reliance, was the idea of just believing in yourself, even if other people don't. And I felt like what was interesting about that, sorry, actually, 1 second, I just lost it. I had a whole list of stuff. Okay. Yeah, was that I feel like it is linked really to the idea that the machine stops. I thought we talked about the emphasis on empiricism and like firsthand experience. And I thought I feel like that has relevance because it has like a practical application in life. And I think that you see this a lot, and I know we've talked about this, that often people disregard empirical evidence in favor of faith or in trust of authority. And I think it's not always possible, I guess, to be able to have firsthand experience. But I think sometimes, like in the machine stops, there were times when people maybe could have had that firsthand experience and instead chose not to because it was easier, because it was more comfortable, and we saw how that negatively impacted them. So I think it's definitely important to believe in yourself and to be able to have that in life. But I think the two concepts, like the firsthand experience and self-reliance, are kind of bound together. Like you can bind them together to create kind of a cohesive worldview. Because if you're going to develop a system of ethics or a way in which to live, I think it's important that you actually experience things and that you actually try to go out and see how these things work in the real world. Otherwise, I feel like your whole system or your ideas are not going to be reflective of reality or backed up by anything. So I feel like in order to develop beliefs and convictions, that aren't created in a vacuum, it's important to have that firsthand experience. So I just thought like those two things were linked, and that was it. I guess I particularly enjoyed those things that we read.
Excellent observations. Thank you, Deborah. Next up is going to be Nir, followed by Jean.
So last week was my first time, and we spoke about Plato's allegory of the cave, and we ended up talking a lot about the journey. And it was very interesting for me to see how different people are going through completely different journeys. So even the journey means so many different things to so many people.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nir. Next up is going to be Jean. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, I really enjoy the Friday meetups. I think one of my favorite. And the two things I have most impression, one is about Nietzsche. I haven't read a lot about him before because I have all this, I heard all about him. It's like his suicide, he's got crazy, all this stuff. So I think he's kind of mad, but then later I found out the things I like make lemonade from the lemon, all this stuff. It's like actually from him. So I learned actually through John about Nietzsche, and I realized he's really a genius, And also from Jordan Peterson mentioned, he's the one who predict after we kill the God, the kind of people run into chaos in life. All these things is very inspiring. Another thing is also what Deborah mentioned is first-hand experience. I realized, the reason we cannot limit it by our first-hand experience, but it's really helped enrich our second, third-hand experience with the first-hand experience, because it's really 4 or 5 dimensional than just 1 or 2 dimensional. So I always like to travel. Like I see a northern light on a picture, I decide to go. So I went to Whitehorse to see it. So I saw some picture, it inspired me to go there. And then after that, when I see a movie, I can actually re-envision my experience. So it really helps me to have better understanding of the second-hand experience with the first-hand experience. I think that really enriched my experience. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean. Okay, folks, anybody else wants to talk about what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just quickly share the screen, and so that we can look at all the meetups that we went through. I'm just going to quickly go through all of them. This is in the order in which they happened. So the latest one was Hero's Journey and Plato's Cave. That's what Nir was talking about. The Bad Habits, Hierarchy of Learning, Journey over Destination, the Alice in Wonderland Life Lessons. I'm just doing this, reading this out just to jog people's memory. So if you remember something useful that you got from some of them, just go ahead and type exclamation mark and I will come to you, okay? Complaining versus critiquing. So that's the difference between actually trying to do something versus kind of sitting on the edge of the pool critiquing how people are swimming. Sense of omission, that's something that Joe brought up. Then we talked about Nietzsche. Nietzsche has been a perennial theme. He's one of John's favorites, and John keeps coming back. Thoreau, Deborah talked about self-reliance. That was the one. Then the connection between intellect and physiology. John has tremendous experience as a personal trainer, and he brings that to bear on, using lessons from that to intellectual development. Voltaire and individualism, the machine stops, again, Deborah brought that up, difference between first hand and second hand. Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea, there it's about the virtue of persistence. The next one is Emerson's Imitation is Suicide. You are a unique, unrepeatable human being with your own context. So imitating is like not living. Next one is Ignorance Bliss. Again, back to Nietzsche's Three Metamorphoses. And we talked about alchemist and tribulations. What is it that trials in life do for us? Next one was on comprehensive development, logic versus emotion, the certainty, let me see, curiosity. So this was Fahrenheit 451, living by example, and urgency and immortality. So these were some of the meetups. So let me go ahead and bring back everything here. All right, folks. Okay. All right. So that was a quick summary of everything that we've gone through. Does anybody want to add anything? Okay. So in that case, I'm going to now start summarizing everything, and we will take up themes one by one. So the first one I want to talk about is John's method itself, which Jonathan talked about. It's actually a very unusual method that John has. Because what John does is he always has an idea. And these are the ideas that he's been, kind of looking at for a long, long period of time. And then he takes a text. So it provides this rich background of a life story or, an entire presentation. And he talks about that idea with reference to that. So any comments on this method itself that John uses in presenting ideas? Because it's very different from, what is commonly done. Commonly, you just start with the idea and you present the idea. but he does it in a different way. So the question is, what does that do? What is the value of it? How does that work for you? So it's going to be Jonathan, Dave, and Joe. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thanks, Shrikant. Yeah, I find, so what I really like about this method of using specifically fiction or some form of art is that it's more memorable for me. I find if I read something very abstract, whether it's self-help or whether it's philosophy, like there's a huge amount of work required to understand it and understand what it actually looks like in practice. Whereas when you have fiction or art or something to point to, it sticks in my head. Like, Bible stories, for example, they just stay with you. And so you've got an equivalent that's maybe more secular. And yeah, I don't know. I find it just useful to have that. If I can't find real life experiences as a substitute at the time, then fiction is really good too. It just like expands me and sticks with me. So that's
excellent. And for me, the most dramatic examples of that was the Aesop fables. These are just 4-line stories, 4 or 5-line stories, but they are so powerful because the story culminates in a moral and it provides a life context behind it. So it's a very good way of concretizing an idea, of seeing how that idea actually applies to real life. So excellent observation. Next up is Dave, followed by Joe. Dave, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Shrikant. Yeah, I was going to comment earlier, but yeah, I think John's format is wonderful. It's very user-friendly. A short summary on the website, when we sign up to get an idea of what he's going to be talking about. And normally then in his presentation, he gives us the details he wants to highlight and the main points. So it's, as compared to Jordan Peterson having a 2-hour video to watch, you can just show up and get the whole thing we're talking about. And they seem like they're always good discussion points. I will be honest, sometimes I've disagreed with his presentation or his point, but it seemed like we break up into small groups and have great presentations and great takeaways. So I think it's been a wonderful format and I've really enjoyed all of them. Thank you.
Wonderful, Dave. Thank you very much. And we are all for disagreement. We are all for independent thinking and bringing our thought and talking very openly. That's one of the rules. Speak your mind, disagree with anybody on anything, and do so courteously. I think that's to everybody's benefit. So thank you. Next up is Joe, followed by Paul. And folks, as if you have not spoken before about things that you walked away with, you're welcome to add those points at any point. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I really find to be impressive with the way John approaches this. It's the ability, and I'll just build a little bit on what Jonathan had said, is to take stories and to extract value from those stories and then turn it into practical wisdom. That's to me is a very difficult task. Sometimes you're taking this degree of abstraction, but he makes it real for us in our everyday lives. So I find that to be a gift, and I like the structure that he puts together as well, the way he structures the breakout rooms and the questions themselves. Sometimes we don't get through all the questions. There's only 3 of them. That just means it's more of a meaningful discussion. So I really like how he also uses ethics and values and some of the traditional ways of thinking and incorporates that into our everyday life and our everyday actions. So that's a very difficult task. Again, he takes principles and he turns them into actions. And I think that is a really, that's impressive. And it's also meaningful because it's not something that's offered regularly wherever you go to any other meetup. Usually it's usually just about the abstraction itself, the story itself, the author's intention, but to make it into an everyday life and meaningful to everyone here, I think is really it's quite unique.
Excellent points, Joe. So I'm going to slightly broaden the discussion, not to just to the use of stories, but the format itself. because Dave talked about the excellent write-ups that John does, kind of both describing, what the meetup is about. He also puts the breakout room questions right there, so you can actually think about it beforehand. He's also very good at formulating those breakout room questions. I know that questions are the hardest part. He spends more time on the questions than the rest of the presentation. Questions are the hardest thing. And if you get the questions right, then you have really good discussion in the breakout rooms. And breakout rooms are really the heart of this meetup, because what happens to point that, Joe, you're making about applying the ideas. If you look at the overall structure of the meetups, all our meetups, the first part is just about putting things down, saying, okay, here is the idea. And then the questions allow you for people to apply those ideas to their life. You can see other people do that and learn from that, and then kind of come back. So excellent. The point about principles to action, I think that's a huge point. He's a very sincere person, and he's a very honest person. So he is very, he's there isn't any kind of show or anything like that. So he says, look, this is what I believe in, this is what I do, and there's like a straight line from there. So that part of kind of applying, converting principles into action, partly he's doing by his own example of who he is, and he's bringing that to the meetups. Next up is going to be Paul, followed by Kevin. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, building on these ideas, John brings sort of a meta view to everything. So he sort of promotes a certain worldview in a different way with every story, but there's some common themes underneath it. So, but the thing that has really been amazing, and I think the world needs to take it more of an example, is he's managed to make it so it doesn't matter if you buy his worldview or not, really at all. Like, for instance, I have a sort of an aversion to so much measurement, but the fact that he's got this big thing on measurement has taught me so much. So rather than say, oh, it was this meetup or that meetup, I'm more concentrating on what I get from his way of putting this meta thing out there, and then make it so even if I don't like the questions, like we've had discussions in the breakout groups where we go, these are the wrong questions. That itself was hugely valuable. So it's like it can't fail because you got such interesting people, and he's created a world where we can all figure out and hear things we would never have occurred to ourselves, and he's created that structure. So that occurs to me about measurement. It occurs to me about how much to use cognition to go after something versus intuition. I'm not saying I agree with everything he does, but man, the way he's put it out there, it's been really amazing. So those are some examples.
Excellent. That's the power of kind of putting things out explicitly, because then the other person, even if they disagree with it, firstly, what it does is that it brings to their attention that such issue exists. It enables them to think, oh, so where do I stand on this? And by saying that, okay, this is where I stand, this is where he is, this is where I am, this is the difference, this is the reason for the difference. And you're doing it in a context where the other person is actually respectful of you, of saying, oh, Paul is exercising his own judgment to figure things out. That's great. Actually, let me hear what he has got to say. And what that does is, so it provides, it's a complete win-win.
Can you teach this as a political debate technique, Srikant? We need it so bad right now. Yes.
I mean, I've tried. I try. That is the what shall I say? That's the hardest part of applying it to current politics. So I'm a little bit scared of that. I've been able to do that. I did one meetup, no, actually 2 meetups on this. And they worked out quite well, but it's not something that I relish doing. So Thank you. Next up is Kevin, followed by Mark. Kevin.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, it's a Friday self-improvement. It's a very nice topic after whole week learning, and for me, it's like self-awareness, but from other perspective, from John, from your question, and I'm amazing about Joseph. Normally, he going to first post ask question. His question is my question also some last time, and I'm slow starter, but it's very inspiration and motivation during the whole process. It just start a topic like a vague, little bit research, read. Then during the breakout room, everything is just whole so my mind just open so broadly. So it's amazing journey for my mind, the whole thing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Next up is Mark.
Come on.
Mark, there is. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Slow response time here. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to agree with what Joe said earlier and Jonathan about this idea of making the abstract more specific and the use of the narrative structure. I wanted to share a personal experience very briefly. Like when I first joined these 52 ideas, I came to these with having read, often I was familiar with the material or I read it ahead of time. What I found was I was bringing my own interpretation of the reading to it and thinking that John was interpreting the reading, and then I would disagree with him because my version was different to his. But when I switched it around and said instead of being closed-minded about it, said like listen to his themes first, and then thought of it as what he was saying as like being laid over the narrative, like an allegory or just an example of his theme, I got so much more out of it. I think I had it the wrong way around. So I see the power in it. Maybe he needs to introduce, for people like me, maybe he needs to just make that point that we're not literally trying to understand the book. We're just using it as a tool. I found that very helpful to me personally. But I also wanted to call out the thing that you mentioned, that we welcome disagreement. I think that's one of the great things about this group and the approach in general, that it allows time for the conversation and the discussion, it allows time for people to leave the central theme and explore other ideas. And I wanted to call out you and John is the fact that you allow that and you respond to it. And like John, he's got a theme. He came with a presentation. People disagree with him. And he is so open to responding to that and taking it on board. I'm very impressed with that.
Excellent. Both these are huge points. So let's focus on each of them. So the approach that John is using is actually a very unusual approach. And he's definitely not giving you the summary of the book. He's not giving you his opinion of the book. He's not doing a book review. He's not, and this is what most people do when they do, when they focus on a book. He's doing something which is very different than that. Secondly, he's on the other side. He's not just presenting an idea by itself. What he's doing is that he's kind of using the book as the base to which you can connect the idea. So he's primarily, he's focused on the idea. He's saying, okay, this is the idea I want to present to you. Let me show you how this idea works in this work. And many times the works that he chose, I like his choice of works, by the way. And the works that he's chosen are very complex works. They are very deep works. Like, for example, let's take Alice in Wonderland, or you take, Thoreau, or you take Emerson, or you take Nietzsche. Those are very deep works, and you will get tons of observations of all kinds at all kinds of levels when you read that, and you should. But what he's doing is that he's aware of that, and he's chosen those works deliberately as being thought-provoking. But he's taking only one axis, one line through it, in accordance with the idea that he's pursuing. So it's a very unique way of approaching work. Mark, does that describe the distinction?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I said it's like the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart. I came into it trying to understand the book, but when I switched it around to coming into it understanding his theme, and the book was behind the theme rather than in front of the theme, if that makes sense, I found it spoke to me a lot more effectively.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way of putting it. It's the book is like the foil, and the actor is the idea that he's looking at, and the foil actually supports it to some extent, but there is a lot more in the foil that is not there in the actor. So that's very well put. Now, the issue of disagreements, I think, is a very huge thing, and that is kind of part of our meetups themselves, and you will find this in every meetup. Every meetup that we do, 52 Living Ideas. And this partly comes from our history. We are an in-person meetup taking place in New York. New York, we have people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of views. And the way I see it is that it's tremendous richness of human energy and human thought that is here. And all of that shows up at the meetup. Right now, all of you are from all over the place, thoughtful people with very different backgrounds, very different personalities, very different perspectives, very different opinions, very different kind of strengths and weaknesses, very different thoughts that you put in, and you bring all of that. Now the question is, how do all of us gain from all of this human energy? And the rules that we have of engagement are designed for that. That you keep on topic, you be brief, you are courteous. Well, when you're opening, you just don't blurt out and interrupt people. You raise your hand in order to speak. And most of all, speak your mind. Because the thing is that if people are feel free to speak their mind, they can actually give you something. They can give you the best that they have. And if you get offended by that, then you're losing out on human communication itself. So absolutely, I mean, that's a core part of our meetup, and John exemplifies that in spades. I mean, that's not just kind of a rule for him, but that's how he operates in his life too. So a very good point. Next up is Andrew Godenick. Andrew, go ahead.
Yes, hi. So
your sound is very faint. Can you speak into the mic, please?
yes, is that better?
Little better, a little louder would be better. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'm going to bring it's on my phone right now. So I'm new to the group, so I can't speak much about the format, about how John presents this. However, there are some interesting points that were brought up, and just my short time, I can relate. And I was just connecting with my stepmother earlier about consciousness, and how when there's sort of this mention of something, that it sort of reverberates across the globe in this sort of time-space continuum. And well, I'm currently reading Jordan Peterson's Antidote to Chaos, and one of the points he makes is that we are constantly trading our moment, our enjoyment of the moment, for securing the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I just sort of was wanting to share that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I want to let everybody know that we're doing a meetup on Jordan Peterson's new book and comparing his 12 rules book with the new book. So I have that I'm going to do tomorrow at 12:30. So Jordan Peterson has been a core part of the background of this group, partly because he actually fits very well with the culture of the group. He's a generalist. He goes into psychology and biology and mythology and science and religion and sociology and politics, and brings all the insights together. And I'm very, very excited about his new book. So I'm going to try to look at the new book, what he's talked about very briefly, and comparing it to the old book. I'm going to try to talk about what the book is going to be about based on whatever he has said, because we've been following Jordan Peterson. We started doing meetups on Jordan Peterson in 2017 on Maps of Meaning. That was before he became famous, before the Canada's law and everything like that. So we have, and most of our members, including John, are very, very familiar with all his ideas. So we're really looking forward to doing one more pass on Jordan Peterson based on this. And we also have a series of Maps of Meaning that Claire and Roger are doing on Thursday, which is fantastic. All right, so I would, as an aside, I would recommend that. All right, folks, so I'm going to go to the next point now. So the first one was about the method itself. The second one is I wanted to make was about the stories, power of stories. We kind of covered it. So then let's go to the points. I really like the points that Deborah brought up. So I'm going to start with those. The point with machine stops, the difference between first hand and second hand or 10th hand. That's a core point. Are you going to be true to your own existence and try to see reality yourself and lead your life? Or are you going to do that? Are you going to leave that to the impressions that you get from other people and try to please them? So that's one. The theme of self-reliance is closely connected with that. So any comments on that theme, the first hand versus second hand, and the importance of kind of living authentically, of actually connecting with life, not through the opinions of others or your culture, but actually asking that question yourself firsthand. So it's going to be Joe followed by Jonathan.
Yeah, I'll just make a really quick comment on this because I found that to be interesting recently in a meetup that you had hosted on the Romantic Manifesto, where that concept reappeared, the idea of first-hand and second-hand experiences. And so you could kind of see some of the crossovers between what John talks about in the practical sense and then how that reappears in other meetups and in other books and art. So I found that to be, where it's to be a really interesting thing as well. The idea of self-reliance is the other thing that you had brought up. Was I thought that was a interesting point that came up in I believe it was Thoreau, where he was living in the cabin as well, and it was also the machine as well. But the idea of reprogram the way he thought is something as as society would program you. He withdrew from society to reprogram the way he thought. I found that to be especially meaningful when I was even developing some ideal goals for myself. And so I found you can kind of see a lot of interconnections, and the fact that he puts this again in the story format just makes it that much more consumable.
Wonderful.
So
thank you, Joe. Next up is Jonathan.
Yeah, I might wait because I was going to ask a question, comparing.
Okay. That's fine.
Second hand.
I'll come
Okay,
back to
yeah.
you. Once we've done with this one, we have plenty of time, so I'm just taking individual themes and going through them systematically. Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Paul. Mark.
Okay, I'm going to be slightly contrarian here in terms of the first versus second hand and self-reliance, because yes, I take the point on both. Like, you shouldn't take everything in second hand. You need to live your own life. But sometimes I see, and also with self-reliance, I agree with that concept, absolutely. But you also have to be aware, I think they both can be traps if you focus exclusively on them. Like taking self-reliance, if you focus too strongly on that, you become unwilling to accept help from others.
which I think is a huge mistake. Like, I don't believe that myth that you can achieve much on your own. We achieve far more when we act not necessarily in groups all together doing the same thing, but when we assist each other along our journey, each individual journey, you help each other along the way. So I wanted to point that out. And then within the first versus second hand, yes. Sometimes those second hand knowledge can be better than your own experience because maybe they have expertise in that area. But more importantly, the real trap, I think, of focusing so much on my first-hand experiences, being blind to your own prejudices. So you have to, we talked a lot about being skeptical of information you receive from others, but you also have to be skeptical of your own experiences. How are you seeing things truly, or are you projecting, if that makes sense?
Excellent point. This issue also came up in a very strong way in the meetup on imitation is suicide. So this is the issue of kind of individual, and we have these two-part nature. We are solitary and we are social at the same time, and you kind of have to respect both of them. So how do you integrate that? That's what so it's a beautiful way of putting it, and we will discuss this as a theme. So I look forward to discussing it further. Okay, it's a beautiful point. Next up is Paul, followed by Deborah. Paul.
Thanks, Shrikant. Yeah, I think Mark just illustrated a perfect example, and this is for me a perfect example of that disagreement brings so much value, because I had the same thoughts in that meetup and now about no man is an island and you have to synthesize the knowledge. But as I think George or Jorge, however you pronounce that, put in chat, it is a dialectic. So that's why the both sides thing coming together is so valuable. So, and I want to point out that even John might agree that when we connect these things to the other meetups, we get even more value, because Shrikant kind of makes them all weave together in some way or other. So for instance, we talked about in one of the others, I think, the generalist specialist thing, and how you need a set of ideas that you gleaned from others and learned to be credible. And that relates to this exact question of how you synthesize your own view, but you build on others. So, but see, we wouldn't even have this conversation if somebody didn't come out and go, you need to have your own point of view and state it very articulately. So there you go.
Excellent. And what we'll do is that this is a very interesting theme of kind of, our kind of solitary nature and our social nature. And we will come to that once we have gone through all the themes. We'll come back to this as a core, because I remember that this discussion has happened multiple times, and it's a really fascinating discussion. So we will come to that. Next up is going to be Deborah.
Okay, so yeah, I was actually, I guess it would be the imitation of suicide week, but yeah, I was talking about self-reliance by Emerson, so not Thoreau. I actually contrast them, because even though I feel like Thoreau takes those themes, I feel like it's very different. And when people are talking about, in some ways, people are talking about the idea of living apart and finding yourself, I actually didn't feel like Emerson really was doing that. I feel like he was more in society and speaking to society as opposed to an individual experience. And there was a quote that I wrote down when I read it that kind of links to that. And it also has to do, I think, with the firsthand experience idea. So it was, the sinew and heart of man seemed to be drawn out, and we are becoming timorous, despondent whimperers. We are afraid of truth, afraid of fortune, afraid of death, and afraid of each other. And what stood out to me specifically about that is that a lot of those themes, I think, are very general, but they can be something that feels remote. But I feel like the idea of being afraid of each other seems like something that should be separate. It should be something like, okay, that makes sense in a way, but you can just interact with other people without losing yourself necessarily. So the fact that he's basically saying that people he's observed, I guess, become shy, frightened crybabies, basically, because they just shy away from that. To me, that's also like in the Machine Stops, like the mother who can't even bring herself to visit her son, or like she finally does, but it's such a struggle because it's so scary. So I think this idea that like, if you can go out and you can interact with other people, and you can like, observe those experiences and learn from those experiences, it can enrich who you are and maybe like reinforce things that you already believe or maybe challenge them, but that they can form this basis. I think that's very important. I think there is a balance, but it doesn't necessarily mean removing yourself from society or from other people. I think that that's a very important point.
Thank you, Deborah. Again, kind of addressing Paul's point. I mean, one of the reasons I like doing these meetups is the exact same thing that Paul talked about, because all ideas are related. They're all kind of related to each other. And by kind of looking at it from different perspectives and trying to be explicit about everything allows you to have a much greater sense of what depends on what is the relationship, what are the limits of the idea that I'm looking at. So for example, and I actually generate meetup ideas from it. So for example, this individual and social, maybe we have to do a full meetup just on that, of to what extent solitary and special. So that's what I will I just love this part of the meetup. So I'm going to go to the next topic. The next topic, the person that John has talked most about is Nietzsche. And several people, I think Jean brought up Nietzsche. So, of course, eternal recurrence that Jonathan talked about is also Nietzsche's idea. So the question is, what have you learned from Nietzsche? Either through these meetups or independently, because that's a very big influence. Like, because what happens is that don't look at just these meetups, right? I mean, there is a viewpoint that Jean is coming with. I was doing a meetup on, if you had to choose one principle to live, if you want to say what principle do you live by? And his quick answer to me was, adventure over security was his answer to that. And that's very much kind of part of Nietzsche and how he thinks about things. So again, an open question for you folks. What have you learned from Nietzsche? So any thoughts, either directly or indirectly through these meetup?
Can just anybody speak?
Barry, go ahead. Normally the procedure is to type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom, but you're exempted right now. Go ahead, Barry.
Well, my favorite Nietzsche quote is, "What won't kill me will make me stronger." And my mother used to say, "Barry, you have no fear." And what that is in the Bible, it says, love drives out fear. You cannot be afraid if you love. And so doing what you love will drive out the fear that you have. And if you look at things as a learning opportunity rather than then you're willing to do then life's an adventure.
Absolutely. Great point, Barry. And that's definitely a huge part of Nietzsche. And I think it relates to the concept of courage that Joe talked about, which we keep coming back to in one form or the other. Whether it is, for example, firsthand, or self-reliance, all of that involves courage. All of it saying that, okay, I will take the pain in order to go up, and going up regardless of how hard it is. Next up is Joe, followed by Mark. Joe.
Just really briefly, I mean, just the idea of eternal return or recurrence is something that, I've learned from this meetup, and that's something that I need to learn. But the other was the process of becoming the Ubermensch. That was, I forget it offhand exactly, the process, the lion, but when we discussed it, the child, the lion, and but when we discussed it, that process of becoming was something that I really took away from with Nietzsche, if specifically. So I'll leave it there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Marvin, that's wonderful. What does not make you stronger will eventually kill you. That's great. Basically, the way in which John puts it, so you have an option. You can be either strong or you can be safe. I think this is from Jordan Peterson, and you should try to be strong, not safe. So excellent. Next, I've always give preference to people who have not spoken before. So it's going to be Jory, Victor, and then Mark. Jory, go ahead. Jory, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. What I got from John, it's kind of indirect, but it was definitely influenced by him, was that eternal recurrence is like the film Groundhog Day, because that is eternal recurrence, but every day you have the opportunity to do your best and be the best person you can be, and in accordance with what you believe that is, or self-actualizing as you would like. And I had always previously thought of the idea of eternal recurrence as just a nightmare, but that's putting it in the best possible way, and it's very inspirational when I imagine it that way. And I didn't really understand that until I was listening to many of John's talks and the conversations around it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jory. Let me see. Next up is Victor. Victor, go ahead.
Hey guys, hope everyone's doing good. So one thing I picked up from Nietzsche is the idea of confusing between cause and effect. I think I don't remember the book, but at one point he was talking about a religion and morals and ethics, and he mentioned something that was really profound. It hit me hard. He says that any kind of moral or virtue, that when it gets converted into any kind of religion, they confuse the cause with the effect. Meaning if something is virtuous, then if you follow it, you will be happy. But he says, no, that's not right. If you look really closely, it's because the person is happy by doing it, and he or she, they will establish that kind of virtue. And most of the times, the idea gets corrupted at that point. So that hit me really hard. So that's one thing I really learned from him.
Thank you, Victor. I think this is a very huge issue of kind of virtue versus value, or causes versus effect. I think one of the patterns that I've seen, at least, is that most people just get focused on the end products. It's like goods are here. Let's use the goods, but they don't focus on what it takes to actually make the goods. And so they're trying to get the goods, and in the process, they lose the ability to actually make the goods, which is virtue. That's the ability. The value is the result. Next up is Mark.
Okay, yeah, so Nietzsche, a lot of good comments by people. Obviously, yeah, the adventure over security, I think, is a very good summation of a large amount of his work. Some of his stuff I struggle with, like the eternal recurrence, because I'm an empiricist, and I said, like, these are ideas, but I can't know whether they're true or not. But what I do like about Nietzsche is the idea that he spends a lot of time in my mind focusing on trying to see things clearly, see what's in front of you clearly, so that you can face reality, rather than facing illusions propagated by others or by oneself again. So I think that's one of the very powerful ideas I've taken from Nietzsche personally.
Excellent. I mean, for me, let's see, Mike, I will yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Magical Realism. Mike, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I don't know that I need 2 minutes, but maybe a minute and a half anyway. Nietzsche, we've had in this thing, in this 52 living ideas, that one of the major ideas was Stoicism. And Nietzsche was, I think, was anti-Stoic. That he said, go change everything. You can't. You shouldn't say you can't be changed. Ubermensch, and a number of things that were saying it's a struggle. You're not supposed to be happy. Maybe life is meaningless, but go change it. Now, there's also a difference between Nietzsche as a young man and Nietzsche is an old man, but he never really was an old man because he went crazy at 38 years old and died 10 years after that. Maybe the numbers are wrong, but somewhere along that. And so as a young man, he was clearly anti-Stoic, and I like Stoicism, but I also like the idea that maybe you shouldn't accept the things you can't do because there's probably a way you can do them. And I yield the balance of my time.
Gratefully accepted. Next one. This is very interesting point because see, this is another thing I love about these meetups is what is syntopical, where you kind of go between all these meetups. You know, we did maybe about 15 meetups on Stoicism. So what's what's the commonality and difference between Stoicism and Nietzsche? Okay, so I'm just thinking, just based on what I know right now, I've not thought about it deeply. I think there is a tremendous commonality and there is a difference. Clearly, there is a difference of style. Nietzsche is a very passionate person, very emotional person, and Stoics are much more staid in that way. But at a basic level of just having um, no nonsense grasp of reality. I'm saying, what is really going on? I will try my best to understand what nature is. I think both of them do that in their own way. They use different terms. For example, Stoicism, most people think of it as that, okay, you have to accept this, you have to accept this, you have to accept this. So it seems to be almost kind of resigned to life, but that's not actually true. It's all about accepting the things that you cannot change so that you have the courage to change the things you can. So when you look at that courage to change the things you can, that notion in Stoicism is quite high, because you can control your mind. So it is very close to the will that that Nietzsche talks about. Nietzsche comes much later than Stoicism. Stoics do not have, at that time, we're talking about the Roman times, Greco-Roman times, they did not really have a good understanding of the psyche that people like Nietzsche or Jung developed, Augustine onwards developed, both the understanding of will, how emotions work, things like that. So Nietzsche is a far more articulate person of actually how emotions work. So there is a commonality and there is a difference, I think. But great points, Mike. Always great points, and glad to always get new historical perspective. You always bring history into everything that we are studying. Really appreciate that. All right. So that was Nietzsche. Next one, we also looked at courage. We looked at this one. One other theme I want to look at. This is connected with self-acceptance, personality differences. So one of the things that we keep touching on one way or the other is that people are different and the way in which they process information is quite different. So some people, for example, are very, very good at and very comfortable with measurement of everything. And that's how they operate. Like John does that, for him, it's not an effort. He thinks it's the most natural thing. That's just how, he operates. There are people who are not. There are people who are kind of more rational, some more, more emotional. There are people who are kind of more focused on concrete. Some people are more focused on general patterns. So there are tremendous personality differences amongst people. And one of the things for me, again, another thing that I like about these meetups is that you actually see the, different people working very differently on the same issue, whether you agree with them or not. So it's like, even if you agree with them, the way they agree with something is different from where you agree with something, or sometimes it leads to disagreements. So any thoughts about anything that you've learned about kind of personality differences? I know that, I introduced John to the cognitive functions of Carl Jung, which in the meetup, we spent a lot of time on. So that's something, a very powerful tool that you can use to kind of see kind of differences and kind of see where the differences are coming from. Many times the differences between people come from just the way in which they process the information, the way they approach things. Sometimes there are real disagreements. Sometimes it is just the approach. This gives you tools to be able to figure out what's going on. So any thoughts about kind of personality differences and conversations regard to this meetup? If you have anything, just go ahead. Jonathan, go ahead. Jonathan, you're still muted.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, cool. So one of the things that's been interesting for me is sometimes you'll join a breakout group or room or whatever it is, and someone will say something, and it's so like they're just coming at things from such a different way that to delve into it would basically take over the whole the conversation. So it's learning to, especially when you're dealing with topics that are very abstract and broad, even though they're applied in this meetup, it's tricky to navigate that and do it well, not come at it with tension, but just go, okay, this is very different. Should I delve into this or not? And so I think that's one of the cool things that you can practice here. That's, I don't know if that's really an insight, but that's one experience I've had in the breakout rooms, which I actually enjoy.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan. Next up is Shelley, followed by Marvin. Shelley?
Hey, one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about just out of the meetup groups with 52 Living Ideas that I've been to is the idea of, are we really designed, have we evolved to people who can process this much information well? The world has a lot of information, and even in these meetup groups, we're encountering a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different ways to process, a lot of, like you were saying, Shrikant, we all are from all over the world, and we all think different things, and we all have different environments, and we all have our own communities and our way of living. And a lot of what I learned, Shrikant, from some of the things that you've talked about is how we've evolved over time. We started in these small tribes with these small groups, and they were really these safe and secure places. And now we've moved into these giant cities with all this information. And really, the world has shrunk and become very small at your fingertips. You can get any amount of information that you want. And because I've been raising children and thinking about how this is impacting my children, and we know that we're seeing a lot of mental health issues that are cropping up, I've just been thinking about, and this is an outbirth of coming to these meetups, have we evolved to a place where we can take all this information in really well? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because I think diversity of thought and ideas is a wonderful thing, but I also think it may be that it's challenging for us, and we need to make sure that we tread lightly with ourselves and lightly with other people as we're trying to work through this new age we're moving into with all this information and ideas of various people coming at us. That's just something I've been thinking about lately.
Excellent. I just want to tell you that Jordan Peterson's second book is all about that. The idea of how do you handle chaos? What has happened is that the chaos is very large. relative to, like we're talking about, I keep going back to evolution in the group of those 30 people who you grew up with, who are living in this one place. Everything is known, all interactions, it's very secure, okay? And we now live in a place where we are interconnected. We are 8 billion of us. We're all interconnected, and we are both positive and negative things are flowing. I mean, it's just that the world is more complex. It's the question is, how do you cope with that? So it's a lot of information, and that's absolutely a key question. And the thing is that, again, I want to point out that there is kind of individual differences. For me, I see this, my emotional reaction to that is, wow, there is so much more to look at. I'm just curious about all of this. And how do you put it together? It doesn't fill me with any kind of dread. It mostly fills me with joy and curiosity and interest. So again, depending on how your kind of mind works, I think that even the emotional reaction to chaos is very, very different. But it's a great point, but at the same time, you kind of have to put it together, and it is genuinely challenging. But so we'll discuss that as a separate thing. Maybe I'll do a separate meetup on that. That's a great topic. Next up is Marvin. Marvin, go ahead.
Hello. I'm going to share a personal point of view. Well, not really personal. It's something I just discovered recently, and it's kind of shaken my thinking, and it's very controversial. So with regard to what Shelley just said, I agree that the people differ and in their mind, in their thoughts, in their way of thinking. And there is an infinite number of perspective and personal opinions. However, the things that I recently discovered is mind-boggling is that in their mind, people are all different, but in their heart, everybody is the same. And if, for example, your emotions come with you when you're born. Everybody are born with the same set of built-in emotion. Nobody teach you how to be sad, how to be angry, how to love, how to be curious. You come built in. And you are born to this world with absolutely no thoughts. All the idea, the thinking that you've acquired throughout your life are from external source. That depends on your experience, who you talk to. Right? If you talk to a certain kind of person, Christian, you start thinking Christian. You talk to whoever, vegetarian, you become vegan, for example. So that's why people are different in their mind, because it's based on their journey in life, and everybody has a different path in life. So that's why. But you come with the same set of emotions. So by nature, emotions are universal. Everybody have the same set of feeling. When you're hungry, I'm hungry, or when I'm sad, I feel the same thing as everybody here feels when you're hungry or when you're sad or when you're angry, because that's come built into our DNA. That's part of the species. So the mysticism or the spirituality, all of them teach people to, if you want to look for the truth, where do you go looking for the truth? You look into your heart. That's where the truth is. And so yeah, and I've looked across all the major religions, big and small, and I said, your heart has a direct broadband connection to God. And well, depends who your God is, but some God. And presumably God is the truth. So yeah. So my point of view is that in your heart, in your emotions, is a place where we can all relate to each other without any barrier.
Wonderful. Marvin, you always outdo yourself. You've talked only twice in my meetup. This is the second time, and you always have profound things to say. Really appreciate that. So I want to connect it with another point. This is a point from Buckminster Fuller. Answering Shelley's question. It's a beautiful question. How do you handle all the complexity in the world? How do you handle all the conflicts in the world? How do you handle these? And the complexities are at multiple levels. There are all these different fields, people not talking to each other, people being suspicious of each other, all of that. How do you do that? Buckminster Fuller's approach was very simple. He says, look, a child is curious. Okay, he's a child. Their heart and mind is open to the world, and it is trying to figure out what is going on. There is no limit. It doesn't say that, okay, no, I'm going to be curious only about these things. So in many ways, we learn all kinds of restrictions which are not real, in the sense that these are all kind of borrowed from our culture. But much of it, whether it is, Buckminster Fuller talks about, the idea of disciplines, that, okay, I'm an expert in this one, but the other field I don't know anything about. He says, no, that's an artificial creation. The same thing is true about many things, like just across the board. So another solution is to kind of start with the child and see how a child takes in information and grows. I think most of us lose something. We gain some things, but we lose a lot of the plasticity that is needed in order to deal with the world. And what we have in place of the plasticity, place of kind of growing things, we have walls of all kinds cutting us off from parts of life. And a lot of it is about kind of getting rid of those and kind of going back. Again, Jacob Branowski, one of my favorite thinkers, who has done a series called Ascent of Man. I strongly recommend that. The final episode is called The Long Childhood. Human beings have actually evolution. Human evolution is the story of longer and longer childhood. So if a person can remain in their heart just like a child, I think they have succeeded. And you see the same sense of curiosity and excitement and just creativity in people like Leonardo da Vinci, more towards the end of their life. It just keeps growing over time. Whereas for most people, it goes the other way around. Their adaptability keeps decreasing over time instead of. So I think some of the solution lies in just looking at the child and seeing what is going on there. Next up is Jonathan and Joe. Jonathan.
Yeah, I was going to speak again anyway, so perfect. You gave the example of the child. Was that from Jacob? Jacob Branowski?
It was from Jacob Branowski was one, and the second one was Buckminster Fuller.
Because remember in John's meetup on Nietzsche, we did the 3 transformations or the 4 transformations. Yes. I can't remember the last stage. So we went from lion to child. That was the last stage. It was the act of creating value. Yes. Super interesting.
Excellent.
Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to know, if that was
that's exactly the same thing. It's identical point. Next up is Joe.
Just really quickly to build on the point that you were just making about the child. The one reason the book Walden, and when Thoreau went in, it was to deprogram himself from the rest of society, what society had told him, to see what he could do on his own, and to see kind of this self-reliance. And that's what we're kind of talking about similarly when we're talking about systems and looking across systems, is that what are the commonalities across these systems that we can draw from these experiences, these generalized principles, that then we can come up with even better solutions that we don't necessarily have the constructs of society putting on to us. So I really think that and that's been a reoccurring theme as well in John's meetups. But I thought that was the idea of Walden and self-reliance, not necessarily self-reliance, but the deprogramming of one's the constructs that we create based on society, I think is a very important point.
Excellent, folks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the breakout rooms, because that is really the heart of it. So we can discuss all these points. And then when we come back, you get to put one question on the table. No takeout, no takeaways, but just one question that still kind of is the most interesting question that you can, or most important question that you can think of. Okay, I'm starting the breakout rooms. They will last for 20 minutes, and we'll be back here again in 20 minutes to share all our questions, starting the breakout rooms now. Right, so what I'm going to do is now it's time for you to put one question on the table. Okay, I want to describe to you what the question, what question we are looking for. And then I'm going to tell you about what's coming up. So you have a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts if you want. What we're looking for is these meetups are about self-improvement. What is the biggest question that you can put on the table about self-improvement that you personally care about? We have two candidates already. I mean, the question has to be of a magnitude where it would be worth doing an entire meetup just on that question. Okay. So I have two questions. The question that Mark and Paul put up is the relationship between individual and society. And then the question that Shelley put on handling complexity. Those two questions are certainly at the level of saying, okay, this is worth doing. So make that question count, just one question, the biggest question you have on self-improvement. Okay, I'll just go around and ask. If you have the question already, you can go ahead and type a exclamation mark in chat, and I'll come to you first. Otherwise, we'll just go in order in which I see people on Zoom. So while I give you a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts, let me tell you about the amazing meetups that are coming up. Tomorrow, I'm starting a series on new book that Jordan Peterson has announced. It's called Beyond Order, and it's all about handling the chaos. How do you make the most of chaos? His first book was mostly about how do you maintain order in the midst of chaos. This is about how do you make sure that the order that you have is flexible enough to deal with and to benefit from chaos. Okay, that's what the book is about. So I'm going to start by talking about the book and getting that series started tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. On Sunday, my friend Michael will be doing a series on philosophical calendar at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. At 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have a presentation on the ethos of polymaths by, it's going to be a conversation between Dr. Michael Araki and Dr. Angela Cortellessa. Don't miss that. Michael's last presentation was fantastic on the nature of polymaths, so I'm sure that he's going to outdo himself on that. All right, so that's on Sunday. On Tuesday, on Monday, we are going to go back to, we're continuing the series on Outwitting the Devil. On Tuesday, I'm going to put forth my thoughts on the model that I have of trying to bring everything together. Barry said I should do a meetup, bringing everything, summarizing everything that I know. And that's what I'm going to do on Tuesday. I've not announced it yet. I still need to kind of formulate everything. And it definitely deals with the issue of individual and society as I see it, the interaction between how is it that we are solitary and how is it that we are social. So that's coming up on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. All right, so with that, I'm going to now call on people to talk about the questions that you have. So let me start with, so it's going to be Joe, Deborah, Kevin. I'm going to keep track of all the questions and let's see what we can do. Joe, go ahead.
I'm totally stealing from what Mark actually opened up with, because I really, thought it was a really great point. But for a question is, why is it important that our goals are compatible with our values?
Okay, excellent. Goals compatible with values. Excellent. Next up is Deborah. Deborah, what question would you like to put on the table? Most important question.
What do you do if you want to progress or move beyond your circumstances, but you feel stuck and you just keep making the same mistakes?
Okay, what do you do when you're stuck? When stuck. Okay, next up is Kevin. Kevin? Kevin, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yes. My question actually inspired by Barry's Zoom. He's very close. He's very close to nature. So my question: what can we learn from nature for self-improvement? For example, can we learn from a flower or elephant or other animal what activity? Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. What can we learn from nature about self-improvement? My favorite person, Louis Sullivan, draws a lot of inspiration from nature and how nature moves and how nature operates to integrate that. Next up is Jean. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, actually I think about this for quite a while. So is how can we learn efficiently? So I have this idea about knowledge tree, like we learn a knowledge. We can't get into this detail quickly. So we need to build this knowledge tree. We have
don't give me answers. Don't give me answers. Just questions.
It's a question.
Yeah.
How do we build this knowledge tree so people can learn from big picture to details, like from branch to branches? So we have different books. You can understand certain subjects.
That's also part of the, so basically how can we learn efficiently, right? The structure may be a tree, it may be a network, it could be anything. Okay, wonderful. How can we learn efficiently? But great question. Next up is Nir.
How do we create human connections, and how do we keep them in all of this chaos?
Very nice. How do we create and keep human connections? Excellent. Marvin?
Yes. So my question is it self-improvement versus self-discovery?
Okay. Is this self-discovery or self-improvement? Very good.
Yes. How do you compare them? Which one is more needed?
Excellent. Beautiful question. Thank you. Next up, let me see. Mushki.
I put a question in the chat if someone could read it. I can't, something's wrong with my volume.
Sure, I'll read it. How do you live in the moment and stay present while simultaneously preparing and planning for the future? Wow. How are you present and future? Operating present and future. Okay, perfect. Excellent question. Thank you, Mushki. Next up is George. George, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm certainly plagiarizing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. What's the relationship between subjective imperatives and collective imperatives?
Very good. Subjective imperatives and collective imperatives. Wow. Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, so my question is, how do you balance self-improvement with all other life obligations like dental appointments, roasting eggplants, hanging out with friends?
Self-improvement and other life commitments. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. This is fantastic. Let's see. Next up is Dave. Dave?
Shrikant, I'll give you a question. Which path to take?
What's the question? Oh, what do you mean?
Which path to take? I'm in the woods and there's a fork in the road. Which way shall I go? I think it's a good question.
That one.
Okay.
You want that away, huh? Okay. Just a thought.
Okay.
Oh, this one.
Which path to take? How do you decide? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay.
David has his hand up.
David, go ahead.
Mine's a little bit like Joe's, but is how do you focus your self-improvement to be in alignment with your near-term and long-term goals?
Very good. Self-improvement and near-term and long-term. Barry.
Yes. I'm big on visual things, making abstract ideas. So I have a question. Self-improvement is an abstract idea. What model do you use that helps you continually to self-improve?
Okay, what model I use? Okay, again, another plug. I'm going to be talking about that on Tuesday, the system that I use for that.
And
So,
I use the spiral, is what I use.
Yeah, spiral is the most natural. Yes, very good. What model do you use for a visual model? Very good. Okay, excellent. Next up is going to be Paul. Paul, go ahead.
It's a question for you, Shrikant. Is freedom most important value in your being?
Is freedom the most important value?
In your being.
Okay. Most important value. Okay. Next up is going to be V. V, go ahead.
So my question is, how do you interpret your dreams to help you navigate through life?
Okay. Very good. How do you interpret dreams? All right. Very good. Thank you. Next up is Jory. Jory, go ahead.
Am I too old to have long-term goals?
Short answer is no. Ask Barry.
Based on what, though?
No. Sorry about being flippant, but okay. Is there anything like too old?
Too late, yeah.
To live, yeah. To have goals, okay.
Long-term goals.
Long-term goals, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Next up is Linda. Linda, go ahead.
My first question is how to organize
Only one question. The best one.
Come on, Shrikant.
Okay. I will.
Quick. How to organize notes, because you see YouTube video, you go to Meetup, you learn about financial, relationship, time management. Actually, Marvin give a good answer. The bullet
no answers, only question, Linda.
So that's only question. Number 2, do you like to read Kindle book, and how can you make yourself like reading Kindle books? Because it's hard for me. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I can't resist. Okay, what is the? If you can tell within 1 minute what you learned from Marvin about organizing notes.
Oh, he was sharing about the book. It's called The Bullet Journal. So I will definitely look for it.
Thank you. Thanks. Next up is Brian.
Okay, I'm interested in advanced self-discovery techniques.
Advanced self-discovery techniques. Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So, okay. Firstly, let me read out all these questions. Okay. This is just amazing. Okay. I don't know how to do this, but let's do one thing, okay? Bring up your participants window, and in participants window, there is a button for yes and no, okay? So I want just quick votes on questions that really strike, okay? What I'm going to do is that first I'm going to read out, I'm going to do this twice because these are such good questions. By the way, I do think that questions are far more important than answers. So what you folks have given everybody is actually far more important than actually answer, because once you pose the right question in the right way, all your subconscious and your conscious mind starts to work on it. So it's a good thing to kind of just have the right question. It opens up tremendous amount of activity, okay, in the mind. It's questions of really brilliant way of kind of getting things started. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to quickly read through all the questions. Keep notes of the questions that really strike with you, okay? And what we are going to do is that I'm going to plan to do some meetups on these questions, okay? So first one, how do you make sure? Keep kind of a note. I'm going to number them, okay? So that's number one. Number one is, how do you make sure that your goals are kept compatible with your values? Number two, what do you do if you're stuck? Number three, what can we learn from nature about self-improvement? Number four, how can we learn efficiently? Number five, how do you create and keep human connection? Number six, do we focus on self-discovery or self-improvement? Number seven, how do we live in the present and at the same time plan for the future? Number eight, how do we balance subjective imperatives versus collective imperatives? Number nine, how do we integrate self-improvement with other life's commitments? Number 10, which path do we take? How do we choose? Number 11, how do we plan for self-improvement towards our near-term goals versus long-term goals? Number 12, what visual model can you use to visualize self-improvement? Number 13, is freedom the most important value in your being? Number 14, how do we interpret dreams? Number 15, is there such a thing as too old to have long-term values or long-term goals? Number 16, how do you organize notes? Number 17, what are the advanced self-improvement techniques that you can use? So these are the 17 questions, okay? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to, so now bring up your participant window. So we're going to do a quick polls, okay? The way we are going to do that is bring up your participants window, and I'm going to read a question number. And if that is on your list of questions that you are really interested in, just click on yes, okay? I want to see the pattern of interest in this group, okay? And depending on that, I'm going to decide, which ones to do meetups on or how to focus. I'll give this to John also. By the way, if you want to do a meetup on any of these topics, a full meetup, you're welcome. Please talk to me. I will work with you to make that happen, okay? So if you want to take a lead in leading a meetup on any of these topics, I'll be happy to help you do that. All right. So let's start with the first one. So you will have about 15 seconds to press yes. And once votes are recorded, I'm going to clear them out and I'm going to ask the next question. So you can, don't click no. Just if you're interested, just say yes, okay? And don't pick more than 5, okay? 5 is the tops, okay? But that's just my suggestion, because the more you prioritize, the further you get. Okay, so number 1, how do we make sure that your goals are compatible with your values? Go ahead and vote now. Okay. All right, so that's going to be 6, 7. All right, next one is going to be what do you do when you get stuck? Just a second, wait, don't vote again. Okay, now go ahead and vote. What do you do when you get stuck? That's number 2. Okay, next one is going to be, what can we learn from nature about self-improvement? Very good, that's 9. All right, next up, how can we learn efficiently? Okay, that's 3. Next up, how do we create and keep human connections? Okay, that's very popular. That's 12. Do we focus on self-discovery or self-improvement? That's number 6. Okay, that's 5. Next, how do we live in the present and at the same time plan for the future? Okay, that's 6. How do we, okay, number 8 is, how do we obey both our subjective imperative and the collective imperative? Okay, that's okay. Next one is, how do we balance self-improvement with other commitments of life? Okay, that's 7, 8. Next one, how do we decide which path to take? Okay. Next up is number 11. How do we do self-improvement? How do we plan self-improvement, both near term and long term? Okay. Next up, what visual model can you use to visualize self-improvement? Okay, that's 6, 7. Okay, is freedom the most important value in your being? Okay. Next up, how do you interpret dreams to help you with your life? Okay. 7. Is there such a thing as, is it too old? Is somebody too old to have long-term goals? Okay. Next up is, how do you organize notes? Oh, sorry. Please go ahead and vote again. Okay. Next up is, what are advanced self-improvement techniques? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, folks. So thank you for the votes. The ones that are really big, I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to put the first top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So top 6 in the order. The number 1 is how do you create and keep human connections? Then we have, they are all kind of bunched just one or two apart now. The how do you create and keep human connection has 12 votes. The next ones are between 7 to 9. Okay, in no particular order. How do we make sure that our goals are compatible with our values? What can we learn from nature about self-improvement? How do we balance self-improvement with other life commitments? What visual model can we use for self-improvement? And how do we interpret dreams? So those are the questions so on. Let's do one thing. Let us just briefly talk about the most popular question. So firstly, if any of you are interested in leading a meetup on any of these things, contact me privately by meetup message, or you can email me at 52livingideas@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that. But what I want to do is that I want to close off just with a quick discussion, just rapid. Okay, so I want just quick answer to the question. Now, it seems very odd and counterintuitive, but when you actually try to give a quick answer to a question, especially if so many people try to give a quick answer, you actually end up finding something very interesting. So I want to demonstrate that to you. Okay, so the question is, how do we create and keep human connection? Try to answer it in between 1 to 3 sentences. Okay, so if you have, and just say what comes to your mind. Okay, we will do a full meetup on this, but I want to get us started. Okay, so if you have something to say, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. What is your answer? How do you, so forget about how should one, okay? Think about it for yourself. How do you do that? How do you create and keep human connection? Okay, go ahead, folks. Don't be shy. Go ahead and type exclamation mark. And I would like to hear what, because this is actually the best way of learning, just hear, speak it out. The act of speaking out very briefly an idea on a deep question, you would be surprised how much you yourself can generate. And when you actually see other people generate it, it is going to speak to you. Okay, so let's do this. So it's going to be Deborah, Kevin, Joe, Mark, and Jonathan. And folks, just go ahead and type exclamation mark to contribute your 2 cents on this question. Deborah, how do you do it?
I guess authenticity or sincerity and vulnerability.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kevin, how do you create and keep human connection?
Listen others, observation, and learn from other perspective, then come back to you, build a good connection.
Excellent, thank you. Joe, how do you do that?
Through virtues and getting outside of yourself and helping others.
Wonderful, thank you, Joe. Next up is Mark, Jonathan, Nir. Mark?
Empathy, compassion, and be willing to be vulnerable, which is the scary thing.
Excellent, thank you. Next up is Jonathan.
Yep. So cultivating character, doing things that excite you and that will make you love yourself, and then self-knowledge, because in identifying your own flaws and errors and mistakes, you're more forgiving towards others.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Nir.
To create the connection, I look for opportunities for deep conversations. To keep relationships is harder because over time, people change. I change and other people change. So people come and go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is George, Mushki, and Jean. George.
Through insecurity, ambivalence, and risks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Mushki.
Hi. So learning to self-love so we can come from a place of abundance and focusing on the collective humanity instead of nonsensical differences.
Wonderful. Next up is Jean.
Yeah, to create a connection, you have to create kind of chance to communicate. Like platform like 52 Living Idea, I also create a lot of groups myself. Every time I want to solve a problem, I create a group. And also to keep the connection, you have to spend the time with them, keep it become a habit, like the regular meetup, you have to keep it continuous.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is Beyond Perfect App and Marvin. Perfect App, go ahead.
Positive thinking, open your heart, smile, and compassion.
Wonderful, thank you. Marvin?
Speak the 5 love languages.
Wonderful, thank you. I mean, for me, it is, the basic thing for me is Carl Rogers' idea of authentic relating, of actually trying to see the other individual and trying your best to do that. So folks, this is fantastic. It's amazing how much we are able to cover in this meetup. And John is going to watch this very carefully, and he's going to make notes. And we will make sure that, we'll keep on upgrading the quality of these meetups in every which way we can. Always feel free to give me any feedback, positive, negative. I really appreciate that. I'm hearing everybody. I do make my decisions based on my experience, but I want to hear what anybody has to say, positive or negative. So always get back to me. Always speak to John. Really appreciate that. And again, I'm just tremendously honored to have you folks here. I think it's very special. So thank you very much and have a nice evening. Bye.